Yeah, this time. Okay, so recall that we were. Sorry. Recall that we have been looking at various ways to define functions. Okay, so just a quick summary of whatever we did last time. So you can define functions by, the most simplest kinds of functions would be where you have a single definition. Okay, and you have a complex or a simple expression on the right hand side. XOR 1 B1 B2 is XOR is nothing but B1 and not B2 or not B1 and B2. Yeah, it should be simple. You can have a single definition with if then else on the right if you want. So you can do things like if B1 is equal to B2, then false, else true. Or you can say, okay, if B1, which means that if B1 equals true, then you want B2 to be not true, right? So then you say not B2, else you take whatever the value of B2 is. If B1 is false, then if B2 is true, you return true because the two things are unequal. And if B2 is false, you have to return false. Okay, so you're just saying if B1, then not B2, else B2. Yeah, this we saw. So please stop me at any point of time if you're doubtful about something. Yes. So then you can have variants of these, which are like concise definitions. So here is another function where XOR 4, you flip, if B1 is equal to B2, then false, else true. You flip that and say if B1 is not equal to B2, then true, else false. Okay. And this is nothing but checking whether B1 is not equal to B2, because B1 is not equal to B2 is true, then you are returning true. B1 is not equal to B2 is false, you are returning false. So you are in effect just returning the result of the comparison B1 not equal to B2. Okay. And whenever you have something like this, you can make it a function by putting parentheses around it and using it in a prefix manner. So you write the function name first and then give the arguments. And whenever you have something where f, think of this as f b1 b2 equals some expression e b1 b2, then you're basically saying the function f applied on any b1 b2 is the same as the expression e applied on b1 b2. So instead you can concisely define it by saying f equals that expression. So that's what you're doing here. XOR 7 is nothing but not equal, okay, as a function.
Sir?
Is it clear so far? Yes, Srimati?
So yeah, could you just repeat XOR 3 once, like what it reads as?
XOR 3. Okay. So look at this. If B1 equals B2, then false, else true. That's what this is saying, right?
Yeah.
So if B1 equals true, then when will you return false? When will you return true?
No, one second. Like we're saying if B1 is equal to B2, like whatever you put in, like you plug in two values and if they're equal, then it gives you a false.
Yeah.
If they're not equal, it gives you true, right?
Right. So now I'm asking you, if B1 is, if the first argument is actually true, what value of B2 will give you the value false as a result? What value of B2 will give you true as a result?
If it's true, it'll give you false. If it's false, it'll give you true.
That is what I am telling here. Okay. So rather than doing this check and doing that, I am saying not B2 is the function that returns false when B2 is true and returns true when B2 is false.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Similarly, if B1 is false, when will you return false and when will you return true? If B1 is false, if B2 is true, then they are unequal, so you will return true. If B2 is also false, then you will return false. So I'm just saying, in the case when B1 is false, then you just return B2.
Okay.
Okay. Is the rest of the thing clear? Are the rest of the definitions clear?
Yeah. The rest of.
Okay, great. So yes. So I'll move on. And then we said you can define functions using pattern matching. Okay. So this you will give multiple definitions, but each definition will cater to different kinds of patterns of the input. Okay. So in the case of bool, there are two simple patterns. That's all. So either false or true. Those are the only two patterns you have. Two kinds of values. We'll later see that if you're defining a function on lists, you'll again do pattern matching. And there are only two kinds of patterns there also. One is when you have empty list. Another is when you have a non-empty list. Okay. So this is not to say that the patterns will completely capture all the inputs. Okay. But patterns will divide the input space into two. In the case of Booleans, there are only two inputs. Okay. The value true, the value false. So you can directly give that as a pattern. In the case of lists, You can have multiple kinds of definitions. You can say at the very basic level, you will say it's an empty list and it's a non-empty list. Okay, patterns are things that divide the values in your domain into multiple partitions. Okay, good. Sometimes they might overlap, etc., etc. We'll see all that later. Yeah. Okay. Look at here. So I'm giving patterns and I'm able to define the whole function as a table rather. Okay. So false means false. If the arguments are false and true, then the output is true. If the arguments are true and false, then the result is true. If the arguments are true and true, then the result is false. So able to give it exhaustively, completely. But you can't do this for things like characters, integers, etc. Only for bool you can do it because there are exactly two values. So you need to be cleverer, and there are ways in which you can be cleverer. So you can do, for instance, XOR 9. If the first input is false and the second input is B, then you just return B, because false is false, false true is true. So false and anything, you will return exactly the second value. If it's true and false, then it is true. And then the leftover case, it can be anything whatsoever. You don't care, because the first two lines catch the first three lines of XOR 8. Okay, the first line of XOR 9 captures the first two lines of XOR 8. The second line of XOR 9 captures the third line of XOR 8. And then there is only one pattern remaining. Here, you can just say, I don't care what the pattern is, because only true will fall through and come here. Other patterns are all part here. Okay, so you're saying in the other case, you just return false. Okay, is this final definition clear? XOR 9. Yes, Rishabh, you want to ask something? Yes, so we programmed all this. Let's now move to what are called guarded definitions. Here you see that in so you have single line definitions, you have multi-line definitions where each line caters to a different pattern of inputs. But in guarded definitions, even you don't distinguish based on patterns, some generic input. So, or you can have patterns also, but even when the inputs have the same patterns, you might have other conditions that determine when you return true and when you return false. For instance, the version which we had where we did if B1 equals B2, then false else true, you can write it like this. Okay, this is precisely the case definitions in mathematics that you use. Okay, you say f of xy equals, you put a large left brace and then you write down all cases. You say if various conditions. That is what this is saying. So here what I'm saying is XOR 10. This is a new XOR. I'm saying B1 and B2 are the inputs. In the case where B1 is equal to B2, then you return false. In the case where B1 is not equal to B2, then you return true. Is it clear? This is just a syntax. You have to put 2 equal to, so you put 2 lines, but you don't have, after you write XOR 10 B1 B2, these are multiple lines of definitions, but each definition is guarded by a condition. That's why it's called guarded definitions. Okay. Each definition, each line of the definition has a guard in front of it. Okay. Only if this condition is fulfilled, you should trigger this definition. Only if this condition is fulfilled, you should trigger this definition. Okay, etc. So let's go to.
Sir, is there any difference between guarded definition and if-else?
Is there any difference between
guarded definition and if-else? If-else block.
There is a. I mean, yeah. This is semantically. This and the if-else has the same meaning, but this is, you can have multiple guards like this. If then you can only do binary. If then, and if you have to split further, you have to again do an if.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, we'll see. So here you can write multiple guards and multiple lines. Okay. We are just introducing you. We will write lots of functions in this style, and then you will be comfortable with things. Okay. Okay. So in the case where, yes.
Sir, what is the rule for indentation here? And in general, what is Haskell's? Like
indentation, I suppose, I think you should just take a look. So here, so if you're using something like VS Code, it will automatically indent things for you. Here you should indent. Okay. If you have guarded definitions, you should indent.
Okay.
Okay.
And in general,
and otherwise, so if it complains, you should just refer to Haskell indentation. So try to stick to, okay. So what you should do is, I've posted all these Haskell files on the Moodle page. No, just use this for reference. Okay, mostly you will only hit cases like this. Okay, if you
Okay, sir.
have some problematic thing, then that is when you need to go and refer to this thing.
Okay, sir.
So when
Got
you
it.
do guarded commands, you indent them, and then we'll see that there are local definitions then that you can give. That also you will indent. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
So here
I
you
have a doubt, sir.
yes.
When we load two or more files at the same time, and
In
then use use composition of functions, one from one file and another from another file. Will it
No,
work?
you cannot do that. Can you load 2 or 3 files?
No, I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, you cannot load it. You can only load one at a time.
Oh, okay, sir.
Okay, and if you want to do multiple things from multiple files, we'll see that later. Okay, you will have to import one file in another.
Oh, okay, sir.
Okay, we'll look at import, etc., later. So we soon, but not right now. So let us first learn to write basic functions. Okay, and
Yes, sir.
as a stopgap, right now, if you want to do such a thing, load it all in the same file and then put it all in the same file and then load. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. By the way, you can always go to GHCI and you can import any of this thing. You can say colon import. I suppose you can do just import anything you want. So there are some basic libraries that are given list. This will import all the list functions. Okay, you can do this at any point of time. Okay, import data dot control dot. You don't need to know what control dot command is. You can just import it. Or you can say module plus sim or whatever. This. Yeah, so you should say module plus. Okay, sorry. So which means that anyway, so yeah, so you can do this also. Module plus data dot. Yeah, that will also load. And then now you can use things that are from data.mv, but there are rules about when you can make something a module, etc., etc. We'll come to that later. So right now, if you want to do such things, put all of those things in the same file and then load. Okay, is that fine? Who asked this? Ajay.
Yes, sir. It's fine, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. So let me get back to slides. Yeah. So this, let's just program this and see how it works. You will see that if you are looking at something like okay, so let's come here. So let's define our XOR 10.
So I had an unrelated question.
Yes.
So this main line, does this have to be at the end of the file?
No, it doesn't have to be. And right now, unless you're doing some VS Code, it automatically asks for a main. Just put this. Otherwise, you don't even need to bother.
Yes, I was just asking, like, does it have to be at the end, or have you just put it at the end?
I have just put it in because it's irrelevant. You can put it anywhere you want. So again, there is you can define multiple functions. You can call one function from another, but there is no requirement that the function that calls should be later than the function that is called. Okay, you can put anything anywhere. Okay. Okay, is this clear? So I can actually load this and ask whether okay, XOR 10. Yes, you see the result? XOR 10 of false, false is false. XOR 10 of false, true will be true because of these checks. Okay? Of course, here it gives a warning. It says that you can actually make. Oh, what does it say? Not exhaustive. Oh, okay. It's saying this because I should give a better time frame. Okay, here the definition has two parts. Each part is guarded by a conditional expression. The value of the function is the first expression whose guard evaluates to true. Okay, that should be clear. It goes from top to bottom. The first guard that evaluates to true, that rule will be taken. Okay, good. So note the indentation. I don't know what will happen if you don't indent. Maybe it will give an error. I'll check. I'll experiment by not indenting and let's see if it gives an error. Yeah, it immediately throws up an error. Okay.
Sir, can you give a default condition in this?
Yes, yes, very good. I'll come to that. So what do you think is the default condition? I am saying that whichever guard evaluates to true first will be powered. So if you want to give a default condition at the end, what is the condition that you will give? It should just be a Boolean value. So what Boolean value will you give?
True.
True. That's it. Okay. So true is your default condition. That's all. Okay. But if you write true, it might be a little confusing. So therefore, Haskell gives you what we call a syntactic sugar. Syntactic sugar means it is something else that is just translates to true, but it reads better. And what is that? That's called otherwise, because that's how you do it in mathematics. Okay. Otherwise is defined to be true, and you can, instead of saying true, you can write otherwise. Okay. For the default condition. Yeah.
So what do you mean by default condition? Does it mean like if something satisfies the first condition, then it's true? Like that's the. No, what do you mean by default condition?
Oh, default condition means if everything else fails, at least one condition should be true.
Okay.
Yeah, and typically that you will put at the end, because if, like I said, you will evaluate in order, right? If you put true as a condition first, then that will always be fired. Then the conditions that follow will never be invoked.
Okay.
Right? So you will put it at the end usually, and what you need to put is true. But instead of saying true, we have a convenience syntactic sugar where we call it otherwise instead of calling it true.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay. So now
So then
here you can mix pattern matching and guards. Here for the first pattern, you are saying if the first argument is false, then the result is the second argument. If the first pattern is true, then you can say if the second pattern is false, then you give true. If the second pattern is true, then you give false. Actually, I can actually give do something slightly also. So you can give any expression there. It need not be an equal. It should be any Boolean expression here. Okay, need not be an equality check. Anything that gives a Boolean will be fine. So I can do, for instance, this.
Can you show the otherwise syntax on XOR 10?
I will have a later XOR 12 or whatever, which will have another. So just be patient. I'll come. Okay, so here I'm saying false B equals B, while if it is true B, then if B, then give me a false. If not B, then give me true. Yeah, this is a legitimate definition. Okay, and so you are mixing and matching. So one of the things is a pattern, but for the other thing, you are actually giving some checks here. Okay, So you can mix and match pattern matching and guards. Okay, that's what is being illustrated here. Okay, so you can reload the file and say XOR 11 of false true will give you true. XOR 11 of false false should give you false. XOR 11 of true true should give you what? Somebody?
False.
Yeah. And XOR of true false will give you true. Okay, great. Okay. So you can mix and match patterns and guards. Guards may overlap. For instance, you can have see this is an example. XOR 12 of B1 B2. If B1 is true, then you are saying not B2. If B2 is false, then you are saying B1. Okay, so let me write it for you. If B1 is false, if B1 is true, then I am saying not B2. While if B2 is false, then I am saying just return B1. Is it clear what I am doing? If B1 is false, then you have to return the, if B1 is true, then if the second argument is true, you have to return false. If the second argument is false, you have to return true. While if the second argument is false, then you just return whatever the first argument is. Okay, this is a kind of condition that I read. Why do I say that these two patterns overlap? What combination of inputs will for which combination of inputs will both these things apply? Both these rules, both the guards.
Sir, B1 true and B2 false.
Exactly. B1 is true and B2 is false, then both the things will apply. But it doesn't matter. Why? Because you will evaluate the guards in order and you will fire the first rule that matches. Okay. So the not B2 part will be fired first. Okay. It doesn't matter in this case because both these things will return the value true, but that's fine. Okay. So we can again save this here and then reload this. Yeah, so we have things like this.
So what will happen if neither of these are true?
What will happen if?
So these are not exhaustive. So in the
Nothing much will happen. Oh, here it just complains that these are not exhaustive because I have given the type to be bool arrow bool. Okay, so it expects me to give all the
yes. So what if B1 is false and B2 is true?
If B1 is false and B2 is true, right, that is not exhaustive. So let me give that. Yes. Good.
So what will it output if we do that?
No? It will give you an error. It's true of false true, right? See, it says non-exhaustive patterns. Okay, that's wrong, therefore. So for XOR 12 false true, neither guard evaluates to true. So you will get an exception like this, non-exhaustive patterns and function XOR. So therefore, you will try to give a catch-all phrase at the end. Okay, and that is otherwise.
Excuse me, sir.
1 second. Let me just say it. Let me just finish this and then you can ask. Yes, so this is a legitimate definition. Now, if you save this, and if you go here and reload, and if you say XOR 13 of false true, we'll actually get a value. Okay, so who wanted to ask a question?
Yes, sir. Can you please explain the exception meaning? I mean, the non-existent that thing.
Yeah, that is because look at the first guard. The first guard will apply for whenever B1 is true, right? Look at the second guard. This will apply whenever B2 is false. Okay. So what all inputs will match the first guard? For what all combinations of inputs will the first guard be true? Can you tell? B1 equals true, B2 equals true, B1 equals true, B2 equals false.
Yes, sir, yes, I get that.
For what all cases will the second guard capture? It will capture B1 equals true, B2 equals false, B1 equals false, B2 equals false. Is it clear?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
So true, false, true, true, false, false has been captured, false, true has not been captured.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I get it.
That is why when you go here, it says, oh, there is no definition corresponding to false, true.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay, sir. I get
Yeah,
it.
which is why you don't, rather than giving some stupid condition here, you should, I mean, this is okay. This is just to illustrate to you what is happening. Typically, you will add an otherwise. That is the default condition. So, who asked earlier that they didn't understand the default condition? This is what you mean by default condition.
Yeah.
The case where nothing else fits, at least one should be made to fit. Otherwise, you'll get an error saying exception non-exhaustive pattern. Is it clear?
Yeah.
So in XOR 12, why does it say that false false is not matched?
No, false true is not matched. False false
So
is
when you click on the warning part, so in the definition of XOR 12,
forget it. It says that the whole thing is
Solving
No,
that
no, no,
problem
no.
is equivalent to
Patterns not
solving the
matched.
Boolean satisfiability problem, which is why it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just says that patterns don't match.
yeah, it is. I don't know. So I don't know why it says this also. But, sorry. Yeah, I don't know why it says false.
Because displaying the warning actual warning would require to solve the Boolean satisfiability problem, so it doesn't solve it actually.
I don't know about Boolean satisfiability problem, but anyway, well, it's not so complex as that. I don't know. Maybe VS Code is not doing it properly. So here GXCA at runtime you will get an error. Okay, so forget the one for the moment. So otherwise it's just defined to be true. Okay, it's nothing fancy. It's just true, and true will always be true. Okay, so you don't need to do any. It will always evaluate true, so you don't need to do any work at all. Okay, great. So this RHS, this definition applies if all the previous guards fail. Okay, great. So finally, we'll get to a final way of defining XOR, which is XOR 14, which is something called a case. This is similar to switch case in Java, C, etc., but different. Except in switch case, etc., in Java, C, etc., all the things involved are statements. Here, the things involved are expressions. Okay, so and case is also limited in the sense that when you do switch case, you are just looking at whether the input is of this pattern. If the input is this pattern, then do this. If it is not this pattern, do something else. Okay, so that's all you will do. So that's precisely what we are doing here also. So XOR B1 B2, you will say case B1 of, okay, B1 can have two cases, either false or true. If it is false, case B2 of this can again be false or true. If it is false, then what should you say? This is the case when B1 is false and B2 is false. What should you return?
False.
True. False. That's right. Okay. If it's true, then what do you say? True. Go back here. If the original B1 is true, then again you can say case B1 of B2 of complete case constructor. Okay, this actually I should call it XOR 15 because this illustrates the fact that you can have nested cases also. You have a case B1, inside that you have a case B2. Yes, is the case construct clear? Okay, it is asking you to, maybe you can do better by using if. Okay, great. So, and then it is showing you multiple simplifications. Yes, when you write code, you can use VS Code and that will actually help you. But right now I'm illustrating how to do definitions. I'm going to do these requests. Is this clear how to use the case definition? Case B1 off, you should write and then give all the patterns that you want. Okay.
Sir,
And then you can have nested cases. XOR 14, which I didn't. Okay, XOR 14 of B1 B2 equals case B1 of. Actually, I can do simpler. No? For false, I should take it to be B2, and if it's true, I should take it to be not B2. Yes, so this is another way of doing case. Okay, so it's not necessary that you should always have nested cases, etc. Do this again. Is the case construct clear?
In XOR 13, isn't the issue that we're never considering the case?
XOR 13?
B1 false, B2 false. How is that case considered?
Oh, if both B1 and B2 is false?
Yes.
Yeah, that is considered here, no? When you say B1 false, that applies both to B2 true and B2 false.
No, yeah, so it will give out the value false, which it shouldn't.
No, when does it give value false? I don't understand. If B1 is false, no, when you say B1 here, you mean B1 is true.
Yes, so I'm saying.
And when you say otherwise, you mean B1 is false.
Yes, so if B1 is false, then and B2 is also false, then it should give true.
No, it should give
okay,
false.
Sorry, I'm being crazy. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, okay, good. So, reload XOR 15 of course, you won't usually give things in such exhaustive detail. You will do it more like this. Okay, if B1 is false, then do B2, otherwise do not. Okay? This is just to illustrate to you the various ways in which you can define functions. Okay, it is like switch case in C, Java, etc. But remember that here it is an expression, not statement, exactly like the you had for if then else. Okay, so now we have seen multiple ways of defining functions, and earlier examples, and also here we had a function with two Boolean arguments, and we gave it as bool arrow bool rather than saying bool cross bool arrow bool, etc. We'll now explain why that happens. Okay, so recall that we write again plus space n space n, not plus and within parenthesis n comma n. Okay, why is this? Okay. Normally functions come with an arity. Arity means number of arguments. Okay, arity just means number of arguments, whether 2 arguments or 1 arguments or 3 arguments, etc. But since in mathematics certain terminology is like fixed, you will say for 1 argument you will say unary, for 2 arguments you will say binary, for 3 arguments you will say ternary, etc. Okay, but what I mean by arity is number of arguments, and every function has some number of arguments. In fact, in Haskell, you can even think of constants as functions, except that these are functions with no arguments at all. Okay, but okay, if you don't want to think about it, don't think about it like that. You can say that every function has a arity, which means the number of arguments. Okay. Okay, so that is typical in mathematics, etc. In Haskell, the beauty is that we'll always assume that all functions take only one input. Okay. Is this clear? This is a revolutionary concept, that all functions take only one input. This is important. So what will happen if you have to have a function on 2 arguments? Okay, what you will do is you will take in the first argument and return not a value but a function. Return functions if necessary. Okay, so which is why if you go here and if you say plus, you just check the type of plus. It says integer arrow, integer arrow, integer. But what will happen if you say type of, yeah, you can also do type of plus applied to, it says integer arrow, right? Which means that it is it will take an argument, namely an integer, and it will return something. Let us try to give a first argument, plus of 5. Plus of 5 is a function in itself. Okay, so it is not necessary that you should give all the arguments at once. You can give one argument and then wait for the next argument. Okay, if you just supply the first argument to plus, it will return a function, integer arrow, integer. What can you do now? Now you can give a second argument. Okay, what is it? Yes, in fact, you can check the type of. That's of course integer. Yeah. So is this concept clear? That you can return functions. Okay. Later you will see that you can also accept functions as arguments. But for now, you can return functions as the result of something. You can also do things like this. F equals plus 5. Okay, and ask for the default type of it. It says integer arrow integer, which means what? F is open to taking an integer, so you can say F. Okay, so plus 5 tells you, okay, I am going to apply the plus function, but I fixed the first argument. Okay, and now I can take any argument, any second argument, and my function is adding 5 to the input. Okay, so clearly you can have functions like this, right? You can have functions like plus which take 2 arguments and add them both. You can also have a function that takes only 1 argument and adds 5 to that argument, no matter what the argument is. But how do you define that this second function that I am talking about, where you take in an input and always add 5 to it? That you can do by just doing this. Apply the plus function on only one input, not both inputs. Okay, so this is a fundamental concept. Okay, and
also in GHCI.
So once again, plus applied to n returns a function that adds n to any input. Okay, this phenomenon, this feature is called currying. Okay, and currying is named after Haskell Curry. Haskell Curry is the name of a logician. After him, the language Haskell is named after him. Okay, but currying is also named after him. Okay, yes. What is your doubt?
So if in GHCI you just do plus 5,
Yeah.
what will it output? So will it output anything?
Oh, you don't output anything, because see, for you to output something, GHCI will look for it to be a printable object. Okay,
Yes.
numbers can be printed, strings can be printed. There are various things that can be printed, but functions cannot be printed. How do you print a function?
Is it possible to fix the second argument instead?
Yes, we will see that later. Okay, you can fix the second argument instead. That is fine. But very good question. Who asked the question about what will happen if you just say plus 5? Who asked that question?
Romit.
Romit. Yeah, that's a good question. So let us see what happens. So if you say 5 plus, it will return an error. It will say no instance for show. Show means that if a type belongs to the class show, we'll see all this. Show means any type that can be displayed on the screen. Okay, you cannot display functions. What will you display? At most, you can display the code, but it's not clear what the code is. You have to go search for it. So anything that is printable, see, it is trying to print the object. It cannot print a function. Okay, but it can do this thing. It offers a helpful hint as well. Maybe you haven't applied a function to enough parameters, enough arguments. Okay, good. So is this clear?
So can we put plus 5 in parentheses and then 3? Will it give 8?
Plus 5 in parentheses. I'll come to that in a minute. Wait, is that what you want to ask? Plus 5 inside parentheses and then 3?
Yes, sir. Yes.
No, wait, we'll come to that in a minute. In fact, I've uploaded this slides already. It will come in 2 slides. So please wait. Okay. So in pictures, when you say plus of n comma m equals n plus m, this is important to realize. So please pay attention here. And this is fundamental to Haskell. So you can view this conceptually as taking 2 inputs and always returning a number. You take numbers as inputs, you return numbers as outputs. Okay. Whereas plus nm means, so here the flexibility here is that you can take multiple arguments as inputs, but all the arguments should be basic values like numbers, characters, or whatever. The outputs are also basic values like numbers, characters. Here you have to take only 1 input at a time. So plus will take n as input. That's all, nothing else. But it will output a function. Okay, plus n is the function that it outputs. It has fixed one of the arguments of the plus, and it is expecting another argument. So this m can be supplied to that, and the result that you will get will be n plus n. Similarly, if you had a so if you want to look at types, plus n maps m to n plus n. Okay, if you look at plus n, this part alone, this takes m as an input and maps it to n plus m. So its type is int arrow int or integer or whatever. Okay. Now this plus, if you look at it, it takes n as argument and it returns plus n as a result, right? What is the type of plus n? The type of plus n is int arrow int. So what will be the type of plus itself? Int arrow within parentheses int arrow. Is it clear? Plus itself, it takes n as input and returns plus n as output. What is the type of plus n? Int arrow int. So you will just put it as int arrow int within parentheses. Is this clear?
Sir, this
Basically,
is same as without using brackets. I mean, what we
wait, we'll come to that in a minute. Yes. So it's the same as without using. Right now, do you understand this conceptually? That you are taking an integer as input and returning a function on integers as output. Okay. Similarly, if you have plus 3, then you are taking in an n. That gives you plus 3n, which expects an m, which gives you plus 3nm, which expects a further l, and then the result will be n plus l. And here, if you want to work out the types, plus 3nm expects l and returns n plus l. So it's of type int arrow int. Plus 3n expects m as input, which is int, and outputs plus 3nm, which is itself of type int arrow int, as we saw. So plus 3n is of type int arrow int. Plus 3 itself is of type, it takes an n and returns plus 3n. Plus 3n we just saw is of type int arrow int. So plus 3 is of type int arrow within parentheses int arrow within parentheses int arrow. Is it clear? So this is the type, okay, of plus 3. So it takes 3 arguments and returns 1 output, but the way you should think about actually what is happening is that it takes a first argument, it returns a function, which takes a further argument, returns a function, which takes a further argument and returns a value. Okay. So similarly, when you want to consider applying a function on multiple arguments, f of x1, x2, etc., equals e. That is the rule, let us say. That is the definition, let us say. Suppose each xi is of type int, let us say, for simplicity, and e is an expression of type bool, then you will write int arrow within parenthesis int arrow within parenthesis int dot arrow, finally int arrow. Okay. You are first accepting the first argument, returning a function, which will accept another argument, return a function, and so on and so forth till you accept the last argument and return a value. Okay. So this is the thing. So correspondingly, actually you should not be writing f of x1 dot equals this thing, but actually you should be saying f of x1, which returns a function. Provide x2 as a further argument to that function, that will return a function. Provide x3 as further argument to that function, that will return a function, so on and so forth. Finally, provide xn as a value to that function, it will return e. Okay. When you invoke a function, this is how you should invoke. Okay. Technically speaking. But to make life simple for you, Haskell adopts this kind of parenthesization as a convention. Okay. So too many parentheses. Thankfully, Haskell makes life easy for us. It says, if I write int arrow dot int arrow bool, what it actually means is, okay, it is int arrow, it's int, a function that takes int, returns a function. which further takes an int and returns a function, which further takes an int and returns a function. Dot 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 dot. Finally, you will arrive at a stage where you take an input, take some integer and return a Boolean value, not another function. Is this clear? So the implicit. So remember that when you write a sequence of types with arrows in between them, this is right associative, as it's called. Everybody knows what right associative means, right? In school they teach it, I suppose. Yeah. So if you write 2 plus 5 plus 3, if you interpret it as 2 plus within parenthesis 5 plus 3, that is called right associative. Okay. Though for addition it is what is called left associative, because when you write 2 plus 5 plus 3, you treat it as 2 plus 5 plus 3. Okay. Good. Similarly, function application also brackets. So types bracket towards the right, function applications bracket towards the left. So if I write fx1, x2, x3, you should first think of it as fx1. Okay, this alone, this part alone. Then, okay, oh, that is a function still. So I can apply that to x2. Oh, this is still a function. I can apply that to x3. Oh, that is still a function. I'll apply it to x4. So on and so forth until ultimately you say, oh, that is still a function. I'll apply it to xn. Yeah, that's why you get it. Is it clear? So this also tells you that if I have defined a function with n arguments, I don't need to necessarily supply all the arguments. I can supply the arguments much later also. Okay, I can partially apply. Okay. Yes. Now who had a question? Srimati, was it?
Yeah. So what's right associative then? Like you said, something is right associative, but the other is left associative.
No. Plus is right, left associative in normal mathematics.
No, in the previous slides, you showed.
Yeah. Types. When I write types like this, the bracketing is right to the right. Okay, I'll write int arrow, int, which means int arrow within parentheses int arrow. Okay, let me go here and tell you. So if I write int arrow, you are able to see it, no? It's legible. It's a vertical size.
Yes.
Then you should treat it as first int arrow bool. Okay, that is what is being done. This is what you mean by right associative.
No, but like how do you read it? So I didn't understand how you think of it. Like how do you?
You have to think of it as a function that takes in an integer and returns a function.
So
outputs need not be only values. Outputs can also be functions.
No, I understood that, but I didn't understand why this is right associative.
That is because, okay, so if I write 2 plus 5 plus 3 plus 4, and if I bracket it like this is what you call right associative. Okay, for plus, of course, you don't call it, plus is usually left associative. Okay, but doing it this way is called right associative. Is it clear? Yeah, left associative, plus is usually left associative, which means that you will interpret it as 2 plus 5 plus 3 and the whole.
So, but in Haskell.
One second. In Haskell also plus is left associative. Yeah, this is associating to the right.
Yes, so I wanted to ask,
Ask me.
When you're doing the actual function, so int arrow bool.
Yeah.
So first, so first it will go from 5 and it will give you a function that gives you that has an addition of plus 5 to it.
Yes.
If you input another 7,
right.
You do the 5 plus 7 computation first.
No. Sorry. Once more.
So suppose you have a function, you input 5 and you output a function which has a plus 5 to it.
Okay.
So then your next input is 7. Yeah. So then will it compute 5 plus 7 first, or will it wait until
it won't. You will see later that it won't. Okay. We'll see later. But you don't need to worry. Ultimately, when you want the result, it will compute it. Okay. So it doesn't matter. Okay. The answer from me now is it doesn't matter whether it computes the intermediate values as and when it receives them, or whether it keeps them on hold and does it only at the end, because the final value will always be the same. Okay. You don't need to worry about it now. but you will see later that it does not go and hurriedly compute whatever it gets. Okay, doing things that it gets immediately is called eager valuation. Haskell is the opposite of eager. It is called lazy. Okay, we will see what about lazy later. But okay, for now I'll not say anything about that. Okay, good. So this is right associative, and associated with this, you will say that a function. So let us just take. Okay, correspondingly, if I say f applied to x, applied to y, applied to z, then you should view it as, oh, first f applied to x, which returns a function, then that applied to y, okay, which returns a function, you can apply that to z. Who asked the earlier question about the right? No, Srimati. Is it clear? These two things go hand in hand. Okay, so function application is left associated.
Into bool just tells you that you're applying a function, right? So that's why.
Yeah, into bool tells you this is a function that takes an int as an argument and returning bool as a.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, good. So Haskell gives this as default so that you don't have to waste your time writing all these parentheses. Okay, good. So this is basically it. Okay, and now somebody asked about whether I can do +5 alone. Okay, and what will it happen? Okay, you can do that, and these are called sections. But before that, just let me recall that you have binary functions and infix operators. You can do the following. For instance, recall that you have div and mod, which are built-in functions which give you the value like this. Div of 29.3 is 9, mod of 29.3 is 2. I hope it's correct. You can check here in GHCI. I can save this code. So div of 29 and 3, I say that is 9. Mod of 29 and 3 will give me 2. Yes. But I told you that if you have a binary function, instead of using it as a function, you can use it like an operator by saying 29 backtick div backtick 3. Okay, or 29. This is just like saying 29 plus 3 or 29 divided by 3. Okay, you are saying you can do things like this. Okay, great. On the other hand, if you have an operator like plus, you can always make it a function by putting parentheses around it, and then you can use it as in the prefix form. Okay, so you can do plus 5.3, okay, or divides 8.3. Okay, you can do things like this. Now, plus works on two numbers, and we already knew that plus can be applied partially. That will return a function. So if you just say plus applied to 5, of course it won't print anything. But you can, but you can do plus applied to 5 and then plus applied to 5 and then that applied to 3. If you want, you can think about it like this. But if you cannot print it, but you can do other things. You can ask for its type. Okay, you can say f equals plus of 5. Okay, you cannot just say f, it will say I cannot print it, but you can say f. You can do all this. But now this, I need a shorthand for plus applied to 5, and there it's called, you can do 5 plus. Okay, what you are saying is that this plus is a function with 2 arguments. I am fixing the left argument. Okay, and now I will be taking the right argument as well. Okay, that is what. So what is plus applied to n? It is a function that adds n to any input it receives. So a more evocative way of writing this is to say that n plus. Okay, n plus says that that's a function that will take any input and add n plus that, return n plus that. Okay, so fix the first argument. 5 plus of 3 is 8. You can also fix the second argument. Plus 5 of 8 is 13. So you are putting the 5 after the plus, and then that's akin to fixing the second argument. Now for plus it doesn't matter, because plus is what is called commutative. Whether you do a plus b or b plus a, the value is the same. But for minus it matters, right? So we can actually see it. 5 minus of 3 is 2. Minus 5 of 3 should be, it won't work. Okay, sorry, do my mistake. You have to do something else for this. You have to say, you cannot do this because now it interprets minus 5 as a number. But 5 minus you can always use. N minus you can always use. Okay, as I say here. So expressions like plus 5 and 3 plus are called sections and can be applied to other binary operators too. So you can say star 8 applied to 3, that's 24. 8 star applied to 3, that's also 24. And again, it doesn't matter which way you do it because multiplication is commutative over most natural domains. But division, here it's an important thing. If I say 8 div and say 3, I'm fixing the first argument and I'm dividing 8 by 3, so I should get 2.665. But I can also fix 8 as the second argument. And if I say 3, 3 will now be considered as the first argument. So now what should you get? 3 by 8 is what? 0.375. Yeah, so this is what you get. How do you know that I told you the answer very quickly? 0.375. Because I went through my slides yesterday. Okay, that's all. I don't think I'm quick at calculation, etc. 8 minus will fix the first argument as 8. So you can subtract 3 from it and you will get 5. But minus 8, 3 will not work because it interprets it as a negative number, not a section. So in that case, you should use subtract. Subtract is a function that works as follows. Subtract. If you want to fix the first argument, second argument in a minus, so you should subtract 3, 5.
Sir, can we not put a space between the minus
subtract 3 from 5? Yeah.
Can we not put a space between the minus and the 5?
No, that doesn't matter. Minus 8 of 3 will also not work. Okay.
So a minus space 8.
That will also not work.
Oh.
But minus in brackets work.
So even this might work though. But instead of doing this, you could just do minus 8. Okay, you're not really doing much. Okay, so you should put parentheses around the minus, then it will work. Okay?
Oh, right. It didn't fix the second argument. It fixed the first argument.
Yeah, you are fixing the second argument. Minus 8. Oh, it still doesn't fix the second argument. It is only fixing it as the first argument. Oh, right. So there is, if you want to fix the second argument of the minus operator, you cannot do it. Okay, so you have to use subtract to fix the second argument. What subtract does is it's the same as minus, except it flips the order of the arguments. When you say subtract 3, 5, when you say subtract 3, 5, you are saying subtract 3 from 5. When you say minus 3, 5, you are saying 3 minus. Okay, so that is the difference. Okay. So yeah, so that's all I have for today. I actually wanted to finish the slides. I have finished the slide. I hope. So when we meet tomorrow, not tomorrow. When are we meeting next? Next Tuesday, right? When we meet next Tuesday, we will. So I have told you various ways of defining functions. I have given you some basics like sectioning, etc. Now you can start writing. You can start trying to solve problems. Okay. We'll do that in the next class on Tuesday. Okay. Any questions now? I have uploaded these slides. I'll also upload this lecture 4.hs so that you can take it and play around with it, etc. Yes. Any questions so far?
Sir, I had 2 questions.
Yes.
One is I think we've seen 4 ways of doing case checking in Haskell. So I wanted to ask: is there a difference in like efficiency in any of these ways, or is the difference just in?
We won't notice
like
even
how
if
it
there
reads.
is- So no. Ultimately, it all translates to case and underneath. Because the Haskell compiler itself translates everything internally to some other subset of Haskell.
Okay.
And then one core is the only thing that is being evaluated. I think ultimately it is everything gets translated to case.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah? But it's okay. You won't see the difference in efficiency for much of this.
Got it, sir.
The complexity would be 4 in either.
The complexity would be
4 in either.
no, I didn't. Sorry, my ears are blocked, and so if your mic is not clear either, then I have a difficulty. So can you tell me again?
Is the complexity always 4 for B1 and B2 input in the OR cases? OR cases?
No, can you type, please? Sorry, I can't hear you. I'm very sorry. Can you just type? I'll look at the chat.
Sir, actually, I had one more question.
One second. So what is it? What is the question? So who asked this question latest? Can you type? Who asked the question at Vijay? No, Vijan boy. No, sorry, I didn't catch the name. Yes, who? Gautam, you have a question. Yes, please ask.
Yes, sir. So it's a small question. Is that why are we using the word of for case? Because usually I'm not able to see like why that word was chosen. Usually there's a reason. So I was just wondering why that word was chosen.
For case of.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's just syntax.
Okay, sir.
Is the complexity always 4 in the XOR cases? What do you mean by complexity? No. Okay. So are you saying are there only 4? There are only 4 inputs to consider in XOR, because there are 2 Boolean inputs. The first can either be true or false. The second can be true or false. That is not what you mean by complexity. Okay. So we'll technically, okay, we'll talk about efficiency, complexity, etc. later. Okay.
So I had a question.
Yeah, right. Somebody is explaining in the case of B being greater than 5. Yeah, that's a good explanation. Yes. In the case of B actually being 5 true, do this. In the case of it actually being false, do this. Okay. So it's just some way of expressing it. Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, sir and Roman.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Roman. Yeah.
So if we had a ternary, if we defined a ternary function.
Yes.
So then is there any way to
sectioning works only for binary functions.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay, but of course you can always apply the ternary function to one argument and then you have a binary function.
Okay.
Now you can do whatever you want with that. Yes. Okay, but sectioning usually works only with operators in Sky. Yeah, great. So yeah, so what else? So, yeah, right. Somebody is asking about loops, etc. The typical way to do loops in Haskell is to do recursion. When we meet tomorrow, we'll talk about recursive functions. We have not touched recursive functions. The quintessential recursive definition is factorial. Okay, let's. So factorial of n equals if n is, let me just say if n is less than or equal to 0, then 1. Else 1 times factorial. Yeah, that's it. Save this. Go here. Factorial.
Sir, how to run a loop in Haskell?
That's what I'm showing you. There is no explicit looping yet. We'll see it later. You will achieve it by recursive functions. This is a recursive function.
Okay.
Factorial of n is nothing but if n is less than or equal to 0, then return 1. Otherwise,
there is no way to iteratively do this.
Yes.
There is no way to iteratively do this.
Why do you want to? When you have recursion, you can do it that no iteration and all will come later. So no, you don't have. Yeah. So if you want to apply certain thing, you will. The basic form of doing stuff is recursion in Haskell. Okay. There is no. Don't think of your usual while loop, for loop, do loop, etc. That won't be here until much later. Basic ways of doing this is by using recursion. Okay. So you should learn these new patterns when you do Haskell. These are closer to what the mathematician would think of. Okay? In some sense. Okay. So here also illustrates that you can have factorial for very large numbers. Factorial of 100, I can say. Factorial of 1000 also. Dare I say? Wow. Okay, great. Yes, somebody had a question.
Can we use the parenthesis to force left associative in the types and right associative?
Yes. You can. In the type you can do. That is a very, very good question. You can have functions which take other functions as input. The quintessential thing is called mind map. Okay. Let me go here. Let me ask for the type of map. Let me ask for the default type of. Yes, you see here you have put a parenthesis. You see, you are taking a function as input, you are taking a list as input, and you are returning a list. Okay, and the sectioning goes hand in hand with map. What does map do? I might as well tell you here. So here I'll tell you map of f applied to a list x1 ... xn will give you the list fx1, fx2, fx. Clear? So it will take a list, it will take a function f, it will take a list such that you want to apply the function on every element of the list. So it will return a list where this function has been applied to every element of the list. So map, you can suppose you have a list with you. Suppose I have a list equals 1 to 100. Then I suddenly realized, oh, I don't want the list 1 to 100. I want the list 0 to 99 instead. I want every number in the list to be subtracted by 1. Okay. Then what would you do? Map subtract 1 list. That will give you 0 to 99. You see how useful this is? Now you might want to say, oh, I want the squares of every number in this list. So typically you would have to say you would have to write a function which actually says take an input, square it. But you can also do it very simply by saying map of raised to the power 2 of, here you are fixing the second argument. This caret, this symbol means raised to the power. Okay, this is the caret as they call it, C-A-R-E-T. Okay, in English, that's what the symbol is called. That symbol is used to denote power, raising to the power. So caret 2 means raise to the power 2. Okay, and so if you raise to the power 2 your list, then you will get all the squares as you see. You can also fix the second argument. You can say 2 raised to the 2 raised to every element in the list, but I think this might take a lot of time to finish. Oh, it finished. So it is giving you 2 power 1, 2 power 2, 2 power 3, etc. Do you see? This is 2 power 100 apparently. This is large thing. Okay. Can you, is this fine? Yeah. So the sectioning works hand in hand with map, and this is also answers the question that you asked. If you want, you can force your types by putting integer arrow integer. So you are actually taking where is the type? It's A arrow B, arrow list A, arrow list B. This A arrow B is within parentheses. Also, similarly, you can force right associativity when you apply a function. You might want to say, for instance, +5 of, first you do 5 plus 3, and then you do 4. You can say that. Okay, so you're putting parentheses there. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Sir, can we do multiple operations in if then case? Like
What do you mean
if
by
a
multiple
condition is applied, then do more than one operation.
Yeah, you can. Where the condition is applied to more than one expression, you mean? Yeah, you can, right? You can say here, if n is less than 0, I'm asking. What's your name?
Soham Chatterjee.
Huh? Soham Chatterjee. So I can say factorial n if n is less than 0 and name is equal to Soham. Then do 1. Else do something. Yeah, I can do things like this. Of course, when you
in the
taking a name also as
then
an
do
argument.
more than one operation. Then do more than one operation. Like then find then factorial n and a plus b, like that.
Oh, you mean like no, that you cannot do. Like statements you are saying. Do one thing and then do another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cannot do that. So you are supposed to return an expression. You are supposed to return one value. That's all. Okay. So give a complex expression to it. Okay. We will look at other ways to do things, local definitions, etc. We'll see in the next class. Okay. 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 You want to do things like okay. I see your point. So rather than this, you want to say then okay. So then you want to say really you want to say a equals n factorial and return 2a sort of. This is what you want to say. Yeah. So if you want to do that, you will say the else a else twice a there, and you will give this as a local definition. So rather than saying 2 into n into factorial, but you should always return one expression. That's all. There is no concept of statements here. Right? Okay, everything is an expression. Is that clear? Soham?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good. So if there are any other questions, you can. Otherwise, do I have permission to stop now? I will. I'll stop sharing. I'll also stop the